Welcome to episode 5 of Scope Creep. Today we're talking about building boundaries in your business. As a small business owner, solopreneur, even a corporate stan, you probably know how important but difficult it is to keep the cash flowing while staying healthy and sane at the same time. So today we're talking about the hell no manifestos that guide our decisions around what we will and won't do in our working lives and how to handle clients and colleagues when they step into that dreaded scope creep territory.
Mhm. So, you know what time it is? It's happy
Yes.
hour. And we are talking about what went well this week and what went really shitty. So, Liz, let's start. What went well?
Well, my high and low is kind of the same story this week. I don't know if you guys remember, but a couple weeks back, I talked about submitting a proposal for a dream client. And like I mentioned, sometimes these approval processes can last forever. And throughout this time, they were breadcrumbing me with lots of positive, like, hey, we're still working on this. Just want to keep you posted, let you know. So I was like, oh, baby, you want it. You are you are totally going to hire me. I was so excited because normally that's not the case. Normally, like, these people are busy. They get sometimes hundreds of proposals. You're not hearing shit. But I say all this to say I made it to second place and
Oh,
did not win the work. But, and I really recommend that anyone do this. The positive was that I asked for feedback. I just said, hey, this was an honor to be considered, and any type of feedback you could provide me around why you guys decided to pass on me just makes me a better consultant. And they actually sent me some really valuable feedback. So that's the
oh,
positive.
good.
And I found out that I lost out to a firm
Oh, okay.
that
I mean,
yeah, that has been doing this kind of work for like 60 years and has an entire like team that can handle not only ideation but execution. And I was like, I mean, okay, I kind of get it. Like
okay.
I couldn't do all that, and I was a little miffed because I was like, oh, well, then why were you looking to hire a consultant if you needed a team? But anyway,
Yeah, that's a little interesting. But I
um
mean, I would also hire them if I could afford them.
yeah, same, same. It's a no-brainer, and they have a big budget, and so we left on great terms. I added all those people on LinkedIn and
Oh,
sent them a message
absolutely.
and was just like, "Hey, just so you know, I just relaunched my website, and these are all the things I do. I would love to keep in touch." So the low was I didn't get the dream gig, but the high was I did the hard thing, asked for feedback, and got some really good information, and hopefully relationships are intact and maybe there'll be an opportunity in the future. So,
Yeah, so important to
yeah.
get the feedback too. And I love that you connected with them on LinkedIn. Like you never know where those people will
You
end up. And
never
it's like we
know.
were saying in the last episode, like just keeping in touch with people is a great way to
So true. And
continue to build.
they were so kind and like really humanized the request for proposal process, which is very like mechanical and sometimes mundane. And they were just so great about it. So, I wish I'd give them a shout out, but I can't say who it is. Anyway,
They're great.
yes, they are great. And hopefully one day I'll get to work with them. But what about you? High, low, in between?
So similarly to you, my high and low are kind of like cyclical in a way. So I've been working with some new clients and I've had really, really great conversations with them this week. That kind of proves the point of like, oh, I'm pulling the people that are thinking similarly to me and, having those good conversations. So anyway, in these discovery sessions, we've been having really just inspiring, great conversations about things like uh, the stuff we're told about, like how we have to appear on social media and like the idea of imposter syndrome and how it's kind of a little false. So, anyway, people unprompted are bringing these things up to me in conversation. And I'm like, oh, yeah, these are
Wow.
definitely my people. So, anyway, that's been the high is that I'm having all these great conversations. The low is that I get all of this energy from these conversations, and it makes me so excited to do stuff that I don't do anything.
Yeah.
Like I get if I do like today, for example, we're recording this morning. I know I'm gonna feel like energized from this great conversation we're gonna have, and then the rest of the day I'm gonna do like not shit. So I am riding the wave of procrastination this week, I guess. All of that to say that is my low point that I feel like I've done everything and absolutely nothing at the same time.
I hear you. I hear you. We all have those weeks, but I'm sure you'll get back on it. I know you too well.
Yes, I go in like spurts of really efficient productive time and spurts of the complete opposite. So it's just riding that wave, knowing myself.
Yeah, and that's balance for you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I also started watching Jury Duty last night, and all I want to do is watch that show. So if you haven't watched it,
Ooh, I'll have to check it out.
it's amazing. So anyway, I'm just distracted by a lot.
Well, speaking of, let's rein it in here because
Yeah.
we have a little announcement about something new that's coming to the podcast from here on out. Jamie, you want to tell them?
So before we get into boundaries, we're really excited to introduce a new segment to our show called Hate Mail. We know that being ourselves in our business and on this podcast is going to ruffle some feathers. So we are sharing those ruffled feathers here. We got our first piece of hate mail this week, and I've never felt prouder. So I'm just going to read that here and give a quick response. And if you have hate mail, send it our way. Like we say, leave us a review or leave. That's the rules here. So the first piece of hate mail comes from Patrick, a recent commenter on YouTube. Patrick simply writes, "How to Turn Business Away 101." In response to a recent episode where we discussed putting your values on paper in your initial proposal. Thanks, Patrick. We're glad you're catching on to the method we use to avoid attracting bigots to our business. Bye, Chad.
I don't even know what to say other than one, this is us living our, kind of feedback to you guys, which is you're not for everybody. We're not here to be likable, and that's okay. Two, this is not about us being averse to constructive feedback and criticism because we really want to do a good job with this.
Yes.
But clearly, Patty Boy here was not trying to give us some constructive notes. He was ruffled, as Jamie said, by our advice to be yourself in your business and work with people whose values align for you. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Patrick and I are probably, or you are probably not value aligned, Jamie. And so we probably won't be working together in the future.
Yeah. And I'm also just curious about like the subtext of that comment. Like, is he saying the entire world is full of bigots and there's no way we would find anybody who isn't? Is he saying, I only want to work with bigots? Like, I would love if he just gave us some more context. But seriously, Patrick, lose my number.
Yes, yes. Forget you ever heard the sound of my voice. And, and also, like, just a testament to anybody who's not hyper aware that just being a woman on the internet or on a podcast in any capacity will get you unsolicited, often critical feedback from men like Patrick all the time. And so
Yes.
what an interesting mechanism that must be for him to hear our words and feel so compelled to fly to his computer, get on YouTube, sign in, and start typing. He must think he's really important, but we don't all have to agree.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So, well, speaking of Patrick, we're going to talk about boundaries today, and I'm going to draw a hard line there with Patrick and say no to him. But let's dive in and talk about the boundaries that we've created in our business to keep us healthy and wealthy.
Let's do it. So at the top, we talked about something that I kind of made up the name for, but it's this idea of we have something in our minds called a hell no manifesto, and it's a list of things we won't do for money, and we may have come to that list really intentionally or in a reactionary way after having some boundaries violated. But today we're going to be talking about what that looks like for us with the goal of encouraging you guys to think about what that would look like for you. So Jamie, I would love it if you would kick things off and give me an example of something that you always say hell no to if you're asked.
Honestly, I have a lot of things that I say hell no to, but the first thing that comes to mind is anything that kind of breaks my process in a really significant way. And the first one is, hey, I need a logo. Or, hey, I just need a logo.
Yeah.
Y'all get out of here with that. But it's that is the question. And I don't necessarily say hell no, shut it down completely. I see it as an opportunity to kind of educate and say like, hey, do you really need just a logo? What are you going to do with it when you get it? How's that going to change your business? Asking those questions. So I see it as an opportunity, but that's a really hard boundary that I've had to draw on the line, draw in the sand since I started this, because at the time when I started, I was doing a lot of I won't say just a logo, but I was doing a lot of non-strategy work focused on design instead. And I just wasn't feeling fulfilled by it. I don't feel like my clients were getting like a big benefit from it. So yeah, that's one of my initial thoughts is, hey, I just need a logo. Hell no. What are your hell no's?
So I think it's important to mention, like, in your response kind of straddled these two things, but there's things on the Hell No manifesto that are like values driven, like kinds of ways of working that I don't want to do.
Mhm.
And then there's also just types of things we don't want to produce. So hopefully in this conversation we can kind of straddle both those. But anyway, I think for me the first thing that comes to my mind is just being in marketing, being in content marketing and content strategy. One of my biggest hell no's is being asked to do shady fucking shit. Um, and
Point blank.
like you may think, oh, Liz, you work in like healthcare and you work with a lot of like really mission driven organizations. Yeah, that's the work you see that I say yes to, but that does not mean that my industry is devoid of shady characters. Marketing isn't regulated in the way that most people outside of this space might think that it is. And my time in the corporate setting was brief for many reasons, but not the least of which was that there were some things I saw being created, whether it was a messaging strategy, use of patient information, things like that, where it was essentially exploiting people who are already in a kind of vulnerable state with really coercive messaging tactics, over-promising on cures and solutions that just don't exist by any professional standard. So I don't get those requests hardly ever anymore because I've done some of that upfront vetting and kind of lead qualification. But there are some times where I'm in a meeting with someone, and whether they're in leadership or not, it's just, they want a shortcut. They want to like pull a lever and have, money and business and things just kind of fall from the sky. And they think that the way to do that is to put pressure on people in kind of a gross way. And I won't do anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you said like you've done the work ahead of time too, to kind of vet leads to keep from getting those requests.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I've tried to be more intentional about too. Like even on my contact form, it's like, hey, what can I help you with? And please don't write, I need a logo.
Yes. Yes. And I will say too, like that was a pretty fiery response because this stuff just like, gets my goat. But oftentimes it's not with ill intention. A lot of times people are just not educated around the fact that there's not actually, for example, a cure for depression. Like you can't sell that to somebody. You can't say that to somebody. We all wish there was, trust me. I would be first in line. But there's just kind of a little bit of education that sometimes has to happen to bridge that divide for people in terms of marketing and messaging. But then there are those just shady bad actors that I want to avoid altogether too.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of them out there. Well, and you said you work with like a lot of, people assume you work with a lot of great people that are like mission driven and da da da. Yeah. I'm guessing you probably get requests from like nonprofits too. And I'm curious how those interactions usually go because I have experience with that.
Oh, I know.
And I'll say it's made me draw some hell no lines.
Yes. So that is true. And I know not everybody's going to agree with this, but I do know that a lot of people who run businesses like mine and like yours have something called like a nonprofit rate. And I don't. I believe in philanthropy. I believe in giving back, and I do that in a lot of ways. But discounting my services is not one of them. What about you?
Same. I have worked for nonprofits, and nonprofits, for those of you who don't know, come in a lot of shapes and forms and sizes. There's, 501c3s, all the other numbers, and they all mean different things. But I think a lot of nonprofits, sorry, everyone, try to lump themselves in the same category as no profit. Like nonprofit doesn't actually mean no profit. It means the money goes into the business again. And I think that's a big misunderstanding. But all of that to say, when I get requests for nonprofit work, I'm happy to work with a nonprofit. I work with my backgrounds in like art museums, music industry, all of that. Like that's what I studied in school. So I have a lot of connections there. And I'm happy to work with those organizations, but I also do not have a nonprofit rate. If somebody wants a discount, it's figuring out, okay, what services make sense then? How do we scale back the proposal to fit your budget? Not how do I scale back the budget to fit the proposal? Yeah. So just remember, nonprofit doesn't mean no profit. That's a hell no for me.
Yeah, I think there's this idea of the penniless do-gooder that just needs your help in order to achieve their mission. And maybe that exists sometimes, but there are so many other ways to give back. I actually do provide messaging and content strategy for a nonprofit here in Ann Arbor that supports women in business, but I give my time in a very different way. They're not a client. I'm not doing business with them. We just have, aligned values, which continues to be a theme. And I find ways to support them because I love what they do.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of ways to support, anybody who's doing good work without discounting your own rates and discounting your own services. So finding what works.
Right. And no shade. If that works for you and that's how you want to live your values and that works for you in your business and you are still profitable, more power to you. No shade on that whatsoever. It just hasn't worked for me.
Yes. And I think it's just important to examine your relationship with those entities too, and think about how much time are you actually spending with this? Does it make sense for you financially to do that? How can you update the relationship to be more mutually beneficial? So all worth examining. But on a similar note, how do you get requests for in-kind trade ever?
Once in a great while. Tell me your thoughts, Jamie, on trade.
Well, okay, I will say, and I'm not throwing shade to anybody who has suggested this. I've gotten some interesting requests that have been hard to turn down, I'll say, because it is the shiny object that I'm like, oh, that actually sounds pretty enticing. But I've made a point to say no to any in-kind trade because it just never equals out, whether I don't feel like I'm providing them enough to merit what they're giving me or they're not giving me enough to merit my services. It just doesn't balance out. And it's so hard to compare apples to oranges. I've been asked to, hey, would you do this for a producer credit on a film that we're making? And I'm like, well, the film is kind of maybe happening. It's not official. Mm-hmm. And also, what does that mean? A producer credit? I get my name in the credits? That doesn't really feel.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of offers like that I'm like, that's interesting, but no. And usually when I say no to those things, it still turns into business. It just, again, turns into a different scope or a different way of thinking about the project. So in kind, I am pretty firm on that. They just never equal out. They just don't.
Yeah. Tend to agree. To agree. So we've drawn some lines in the sand, right? And I know there are more of them for both of us, but these are just a few. How did you get to this point? What happened for you to have these opinions on trade and nonprofits and logo wanting folks? What can you think of a time or a specific thing that happened?
Well, I will say at the agency I worked at, we did, I think a lot of agencies do this, they take on a pro bono client, nonprofit client or whatever. And so I was stuck working on that project a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. It did not financially make sense for me to be getting paid what I was getting paid and the agency not making any money off of all the work I was doing for this. So that was the first time I was like, I don't think this is going to work for me when I do start my own thing. But, I think so much of it was trial and error though. In my first year of business, I was taking on a little bit of everything, honestly, just to figure out what I did like to do and what was going to be the hell no, I'm never doing that again. And it was a lot of trial and error. I'll say I can't tell you how many websites I built in my first year or two freelancing full time. I have no business building websites anymore. First of all, my brain started working in CSS and I was just my brain is broken now and I cannot get out of this. I was trying to do everything in CSS for some reason. Anyway, it just takes a different brain to do websites. And I realized that after doing them. And so I was like, no, I'm saying goodbye to this, which is a hard thing to do too. Cause it's oh, that pays really well, but I have no business. I have no business doing that. Yeah. So Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? I mean, it's definitely a bumpy road, I'll say.
For sure. Trial and error all day long. I think once you've experienced the difference between doing, for example, like what I mentioned before, ethically questionable and or just shitty work that you weren't in charge of scoping.
Mm,
You're just kind of doing, you're just fulfilling a creative brief or you're just following directions and you realize you're creating a bunch of work that one doesn't make you feel like good in the guts and doesn't light you up or inspire you. And two, it's nothing you would ever want to put in a proposal because you see how poorly strategized it is. And then you step outside of that and, like you, lots of trial and error. Like I said, I start getting my feet wet in projects where I'm like, oh, like this turns my light bulb on. And
yeah.
this makes me excited and actually enjoy this. And oh my gosh, when that happens, one, I'm making more money because I'm kind of in my lane of genius and like there's less friction. And two, the work is better. I'm stoked. I'm splashing that shit all over LinkedIn because I'm
Yes.
proud of it. I'm proud of it. I'm excited by it because I know it's well executed. I know the strategy is solid. And so it's not black and white. It's not this or that always. Like there's some projects that are a little bit of both. But I think once you've had that experience, it's hard to go back to the stuff that feels like hard and drudgery and just gross. Like it's really hard if you can find ways to build capacity for options. It's hard to want to go back to do any of that.
Yeah. I'll say it's also like it's kind of easy to go back to it too in a detrimental way where you're like, oh, your mind is like, oh, but I made really good money doing that thing. So
Yeah.
like in the slower seasons, I find myself like, oh, what little things can I pick up? And then I have to
Mhm.
remember like, oh, those little things are going to equal so much time that I could be spending doing finding business that better suits me.
Yeah.
Um, or also just like doing the work that better
Yeah.
suits me,
Yeah.
whether that's for a client or just doing that work myself so I can build business. So it's
Totally.
easy to backslide into that. And we'll touch on some of those times we've done that.
Yeah.
Oops. But
Yeah.
I also just want to touch on too, like you mentioned this last episode, the importance of like niching the fuck down. And
hmm
I think when you think about it, I'm not super niche down in an industry specifically, but I am really niche down in my offering. And I think that has changed my boundaries in my business and it made it easier for me to say no to things because I'm just way more upfront about what I do and don't do.
Yeah. Your path
Um,
is clear.
yes, exactly. And it's so I get more qualified leads
hmm
because I'm not getting a ton of the, hey, I just need a logo
Right.
requests
Right.
because I'm talking about brand strategy now
Yep.
and not logo design.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and I think part of this elephant in the room worth mentioning, right, is that Jamie and I, for a lot of different reasons, some of the same reasons, have the incredible privilege of being able to say no to things that doesn't light us up or that
Absolutely.
doesn't inspire us or that doesn't wind up in a portfolio. I have lived a large part of my life where I didn't have that privilege just financially. I had to do whatever I needed to do to make sure my bills were paid. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And there is nothing wrong with saying yes to uninspiring work because you need to keep a roof over your head and you need to keep yourself fed. This conversation is not meant to be aspirational and to say that, oh, you should, there's some moral high ground to be achieved by only saying yes to these high minded, enlightening, lucrative projects. We're just here saying if you can pick those, if you can put yourself in a position to pick those, it's a better way to go. And we're honoring the privilege that we have to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I think it's important to know too, if you are in a position to say no to that work, also like being flexible in like when you might say yes to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
you are having a down season and it's like, hey, how do I need money. What
Yeah.
can I do to make that happen without sacrificing other opportunities that might come my way? And two, it's like different seasons. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I feel like, oh, my strategy brain feels a little burnout. Maybe I need to switch it up and do more of the design that I've, come to be familiar with. So just being self-aware in that too.
Yeah. Just making those choices with intention, being honest about the situation that you're in, and putting yourself in the driver's seat as much as possible, as opposed to being in a situation where you just have to do what somebody else is demanding of you.
Yes. Yeah. And we've talked about some really big boundaries, like the types of work we do or don't do. But I'm also curious to hear, what are some like daily boundaries that you have? And I know I have these with myself, but also with your clients.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am in content strategy and content writing, and that can mean so many different things. And that's okay. There are lots of types of business writing and marketing writing that I could do that I just don't really like to do. And so if someone says, hey, we just need somebody to just handle our social media captions, could I do that? Sure. Do I want to be a social media manager? Hell no. Now, when I'm selling packages, it's of, like I'm going to write a blog post and a newsletter, and out of that blog post, I'll pull 3 captions for you. That's like a really like easy and organic list to
Sure.
do that feels like connected to the bigger project. That's
It's also
totally
like
fine.
value add.
Yeah, and I love to do that for my clients, and it's just very efficient since I wrote the big piece of copy for me to chop it down into the small piece of copy because I know what's there. But no, I don't do like social media, and I don't do like direct sales copywriting, like the really like heavy hit, and I don't do any print stuff. Sometimes my words wind up in print like down the road, but that's not the bulk of my business. Never has been, never will be.
Yeah. Yeah. I find myself asking, could I do it? Yes. Should I do it? No.
Probably not.
And I found a way to remedy that too, because I mean, I am a very giving person. Like I feel like I'm an over deliverer. My clients don't ask me to be. I'm just like, ooh, but you could do this. And
Yeah.
like I'm an idea person.
Yes, you are.
So in order for me to like rein myself in, I have found it really beneficial for me to like build this network. I built Strange Salt, the creative collective that we're both a part of, to kind of remedy that. So I don't feel the guilt of like saying no. I can be like, no, I don't do logos, but you should talk to my friend Sarah. Or, hey, you're in mental health. I know nothing about that. You should talk to Liz. Like, so building that network has given me kind of like an escape route for being able to uphold those boundaries, which is super helpful. I mean, it's like kind of self-serving. Strange Salt's great, but I will say that was kind of the intention behind it, was to, alleviate some guilt.
Yeah, and I mean, for your clients, that's just so helpful. I know it is for mine as well. When I'm like, I know you really want me to do this thing, and I either don't have the bandwidth, it's not within the scope, or I don't want to, and I'm not good at it, so I shouldn't do it. It is so much easier to be like, hey, I can't handle this at this point, but I know the exact person you should talk to. Like they don't have to then go to LinkedIn or Indeed or
Yeah.
some shit and start digging through piles of resumes and people. Like, man, that is in and of itself an incredible value add.
Yeah. And I think, I just I love being empowered by other people to uphold my boundaries in that way too. And it's like a constant reminder. Being a part of the collective like that is a constant reminder that like, oh yeah, these people are here to support what I'm doing, and I'm here to support them. And we all help each other uphold those boundaries. So anyway, this is just a nice thing. All right. I'm curious about this scenario. A client somehow gets your phone number and texts you at 6 p.m. asking you to update something in whatever you just delivered. What do you do?
Change my phone number. No,
Block.
seriously, I harp on this background all the time, but having been in a career where the word crisis is very real, in my field, I am very well acquainted with the reality that there is no such thing as a content crisis or emergency. Now, I'm not talking about crisis communication. I'm saying like, it is the rarest of rare circumstances where that request would need to be fulfilled at that time at 6 p.m. without an incredible detriment to myself or to someone's business. So let's buy into that reality first.
Yeah, absolutely.
And second, like I probably wouldn't respond because it's outside of working hours. So yeah, I'm trying to think of a scenario where, it would have to be a oncoming disaster that was seriously detrimental, and I'm not thinking on my feet of what that could be, but yet 99.9% of the time I'm not going to answer that. And then I'll probably follow up via email the next day, since that would have been like an approved and agreed upon line of communication, and say like, hey, I know you texted me on my personal number, remind them to keep the communication in the inbox, because that's what our terms would have indicated, and let them know that it's also, so that all of our communication can be in one place, and I can make sure that I'm like responding to everything in a timely fashion.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I,
what would you do?
well, I, so I, it sounds really similar, but in my contracts and in my proposals, I specifically outline, hey, these are my working hours,
Same.
9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I respond to emails within one business day. And I, and we're only going to talk via email. Like all requests must be in writing via email or a scheduled phone call. Like you can't just call me because I'm not going to answer. Sorry.
Right.
But so I outline all of that. In the instance somebody does, text me or whatever, I'll usually, if it's after hours, if I respond, it will be to tell them I'll get to it tomorrow. If I, and that's if I respond. A lot of times I don't. I'll leave it unread and respond the next day via email, like you said, and I'll say, "Hey, I saw your text." And I think that's so important. Just you bringing up like reminder. This is how we communicate.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how important that is as a business owner, like to keep communication channels in one place. And that's not just, I'm not just saying that as like a business owner myself, but for my clients, because how many times have you been working with somebody and they're like, oh, where was that message? Was it in a text? Was it on a phone call?
In
Was it an
Slack,
email?
yeah.
Yeah. And so like having that one channel of communication is not because I'm being like a dick and I don't want to give out my phone number. I mean, I don't, but it's to help you stay organized. It's not just to help me stay organized. It's to help you uphold a boundary too, and help you not work as much as you might be.
Right. Right. And I think that's totally reasonable. I really do. And it keeps all the communication in one place for the client as well, which I would think would be important.
Yes, you would think it would be important.
How about we start telling people in our proposals that, like, if you contact me on my personal number more than twice, this communication will be turned into a meme about boundaries to
You
be
might be
shared
featured on Scope
I'm just saying, it could happen. It could
Oh my
happen.
gosh. Well, okay, as we kind of finish this conversation about boundaries, tell me about a time that you didn't uphold a boundary and it like slapped you in the face later.
I would love to just be full of shit right now and tell you guys that, oh, back when I was early in my career, which, no, literally like 3 months ago, I had some shit blow up in my face because somebody dangled a carrot in front of me. It was a big name in mental health tech. I was on the phone with their CEO, their CMO, their clinical director, all of their big decision makers. I was having these really great conversations with about like a multi-tiered strategy to do all kinds of cool stuff for their brand. And I kind of got caught up in that. And I usually don't have multiple discovery calls. But they were trying to think how to say this. They were trying to have me solve a really unique set of problems that involve different stakeholders. So I kind of understood like, oh, you want me to be the bridge between stakeholders, which I often am, especially for startups who are having alignment problems. And so I felt like those conversations were justified. So I kept having them. And then the CEO says to me, I know you've been having all these different conversations. Would you mind just like dropping all of kind of your recommendations into a doc, and that way I have it all in one place. And in my mind, I'm like, so you want me to spend 5 hours on the phone with these different stakeholders, which I've already done, and now you want me to document this strategy that I have created about how to solve all these business problems that you have amongst these stakeholders. So not only like solving the problems, but also like communicating to everyone involved so there's efficiency in place. But he assured me that was, so that they could move forward with scoping and that documentation was there. Oh, I know, I'm cringing. I'm a freaking idiot. I did it.
I mean, I would have done the same thing.
Well, I did it because this would have been huge. They had just completed another huge record-breaking funding round, and I was like, yes, this is such a cool project. I had really great synergy with the leader. I like to think I'm a pretty good detector of BS, and when someone's just trying to like pull one over on me, didn't get any of that. But long story short, I send off the strategy document, and he ghosts me not once, but twice. And I find out through the LinkedIn grapevine a couple weeks later that he hired a competitor. And I'm sitting, of course, I revoke permission from the document, but like
Oh, sure.
after
Yeah.
the fact. But I'm sitting there thinking, what are the odds that he just took that strategy and said, hey, like, this is what I need you to do? And I never heard from anyone on that team again. So yes, I'm salty about it because
You have a right to be.
it was so unprofessional, and it took me aback because honestly, like this stuff doesn't happen all the time. Like most people that I work with are good people who are in the field of mental health for the right reasons and who give a shit about people and want to help them solve some of their problems that our system has created. And like, so to have that happen was just, I was like, man, I felt so guilty and I really blamed myself. But you're right. Like, this can happen to anybody. And
Yeah.
I kind of had to just keep it moving. But what a reminder. I wouldn't have felt half as shitty about this if I'd upholded my own policies, which is 1 discovery call, 2 max, and not providing documented strategy without being paid to do so. And I did both of those things because I kind of just got duped and got caught up in things. So
Yeah. I mean, it's like we said earlier, it's so easy to backslide into those habits in times when you're like, okay, but this is a good opportunity, or but I could use this money. Like it's so easy to say yes to those things when you're in a pinch. And
or
so
when the
yeah, I mean,
carrot is really shiny.
yes. Oh, absolutely. When the like exposure is on the line. Yes. But yeah, I mean, this happens to anybody and everybody. Like everybody makes bad decisions that go against their own beliefs sometime. And it's just kind of like acknowledging when you do and being like, well, never again.
Yep.
You're probably going to do it again, but acknowledging that it happened.
But I'm going to try. And it's such a reminder that most people are ethical, responsible, professional, and we're not writing these policies and boundaries for those people. Those people aren't going to bristle at these boundaries. They're going to totally get it. But it really is to protect ourselves from this one in whatever number of people that are going to pull shady shit like this.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also like when other people don't have boundaries, they don't expect you to. And so that's just one of those like red flags to look out for too. Like if you're talking to somebody about a proposal or project and they're emailing you at 1 a.m. like with a major sense of urgency, like, no, we don't all keep normal working hours, but if they're like freaking out at 1 a.m. sending you 4 emails in a row, it's like, maybe take that as a sign that that's not for you unless you are also working at 1 a.m., you know?
Right. So make me feel better and tell me one of the times this has happened to you recently, because I know I'm not alone.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, I used to do some websites because I was like, I can do this.
Yeah.
Should I do it? No. But I was like, I am done with websites. Any website requests I'm sending to somebody else. Well, at the end of, I guess it was 2021, because this project happened all of last year, spoiler alert. But so at the end of 2021, somebody asked me it was a previous client asked me to help them with a new website. I was like, yeah, let's do it. I needed the extra money. It was like the end of the year and you want to like reach that goal you had in mind. So I was like, if I take this project on, it'll help me reach that. So the project was scoped out for like maybe 6 weeks. We started in January. When I tell you that website didn't launch until September.
What?
Do you know? I know. And it was like, the hard thing was, if it was on me, it was on me. I would be upfront with that. But it was really just the client, like, they weren't really ready to do this website to begin with. They didn't have all their stuff in order that they needed to. So I was waiting on them so much. I spent the majority, 9 months, y'all. I spent 9 months chasing them for the same stuff, having the same conversations over and over again, just for like a few bucks to put me over my 2021 goal, which then didn't even happen because
Right.
the project lasted until September. Like
Oof.
now I'm truly saying like never again, but you know how it goes.
So tell the folks that are listening, if they're not aware, what an extension of deadline and scope does to a freelance business.
Oh yeah. So I will say and I think a lot of people I work with in like specifically the strategy and identity business, we usually block off time on our schedules to work on a specific project. So this allows me to, hey, my brain's in this thing. I don't have to switch gears 1,000 times during the week. You're getting my best work for these 6, 8, 12 weeks, however long I'm committed to the project. When that goes over, first of all, it means I have more work than I have initially planned for. So if I've booked business in the future, now I'm working on more projects than I normally would. So you're not getting my best self, and neither are my other clients. So first and foremost, that. Secondly, when a project goes over, I can't spend time building more business because there's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of like, when will this end? How much
Right.
can I take on? But also, I'm in that work so much, I don't have time to get on the internet and look for more work. So it's like twofold. It's like you're not getting my best self, and also you're not helping me build my business. Like you're not doing me any
Not good.
favors.
Not good.
Yeah. I mean, is it similar for you as far as when
Totally.
deadlines go?
I just thought it'd be helpful to kind of game that out a
Yeah.
little bit because there's these boundaries that are oh, like it's not just that maybe Jamie doesn't like building websites because those boundaries are cool to have if you just
Yeah.
don't like something. But so many of my boundaries, and it sounds like your boundaries too, are around if we don't have them, it will break our business or at least really negatively impact our ability to deliver and bring new clients in the door. And that's hugely damaging for the way that we work.
Well, and thinking back to our very first episode, talking about like those experiences that kind of shaped the way we think about work.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever these sort of instances happen, I can see myself becoming the person I was when I was super stressed out working at a marketing agency, doing a
Yeah.
ton of work that I A, had no business doing, and B, was like overwhelmed with.
Yeah.
And I see those glimpses of myself falling back into that. And I'm like, oh, I can't. I can't. Like, this is bad.
Triggered.
Yes. So, I mean, you have to have some sort of experience to like inform those boundaries and some sort of experience to recognize the signs of when you have totally fucked yourself.
Yeah. Oh, we know them well. We don't like to acknowledge them, but sometimes you have to. You have to look at that
Yes.
stuff.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, we're really just dancing around the topic of scope creep.
Really. I had no idea. That's what we're talking about.
So I would love to know, just to kind of round out this conversation, what do you do? What is like the one thing you do when somebody engages in that scope creep? You know, they're trying to extend a timeline. They're trying to say, oh, and can you also, or like, hey, do you mind to send me?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, doing the heavy lifting on the front end, the vetting, the like over communicating exactly how I work and my policies, what I do, what I don't do, when I'm available, when I'm not available. That does much of that work for me. But inevitably things move pretty quickly and sometimes priorities change and you do have to pivot. And so I tend to, especially in the beginning of client relationships, I will often do like a test phase where, oh, hold on, dogs are barking. Oh, there's a cement
That's
truck
okay.
pulling in my yard.
Oh, fun.
Okay, maybe they'll be done. I'm not sure. Shit, what was I saying?
if you want to
Oh,
say a test phase.
so I'll do like a test phase, especially if I think that it's work that could be ongoing. And that's a benefit for myself and the client. We can kind of feel out how we work together with a really limited scope. Okay. Like we're going to do X number of pieces of content, things like that. And then I'm really intentional at the end of that time period, often 30 days. We will rescope and align on what we want to accomplish in the next 90 days. So I kind of do things incrementally. There is no way on this planet I'm writing like a year-long retainer without that. There's just too much opportunity for error. But then inevitably things change and clients have different needs, and I want to let them know that I'm always flexible. So when those questions come, I'll let them know like, hey, like this is where we're at within our current agreement. This is how much time or how many deliverables we have remaining, things like that. I really want to make sure that you get what you need. Do you want to look at a rescope, or would you like me to like bill you hourly for this additional work on top of the agreement that we already have in place? So give them some options. I'm not slamming the door in their face. I want to honor that they have needs that maybe weren't apparent when we set out together, but let them know that, yeah, you can have that. But if it's anything more than like something pretty simple, like it's going to cost you because it's beyond what we agreed to do together.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking about this conversation before we started recording, and like I think about it like the improv game yes and, but the complete opposite where it's no but.
Yeah.
And I try to think of any of those like scope creep sort of things as an opportunity for something else if I want it. Like if I don't, then it's a sorry, no, this is why, here's the agreement, blah, blah, blah. They might find a loop. They might try to find like a loophole in this. They won't.
Yeah.
And then we just, you know, finish the project, go our separate ways, wash our hands of each other. It's fine. But a lot of times if the relationship's good and somebody asks something, first of all, a lot of my clients, because I look for good clients, are like, hey, I totally understand if this is outside of our agreement. Wanted to ask if it is outside of the agreement, how can we work on it?
Yeah.
And
Totally,
so
totally reasonable.
that's like proof to myself that like, okay, I found good people.
Absolutely. And it shouldn't be that hard to understand that people's time has value, but you know, it's not always a given.
Yes.
And you're talking too about the importance of the relationship itself. And if you have a good, open, transparent relationship with your client, these conversations are so much easier because you can assume that positive intent. You could assume that they're not trying to scam you or pull one over. Like if you already have that feeling in your gut that somebody's just trying to drag you around and then you get a request, in my mind, that's like, nope, shutting it down. I'm way less likely to be flexible, to be curious, and to try to solve the problem if they've just continually tried to get more and more and more for less.
Yes. It's back to that idea of like relationships, right? Like if you have a healthy relationship with this person and they don't see you as just like a pixel pusher, if you're a
Right.
designer, you know, like
Yeah.
it's a totally different thing to be able to uphold those boundaries in
Yeah.
those relationships, and they'll respect that. So
Totally. Recently, I had a client. You guys might not know what this is, but in the world of content creation, there's something called a kill fee, and sometimes you can get a creative brief. You can be asked to create something, and for whatever reason, the editor says, we're not going to publish this. And even though you've put the time in, and this is something to pay attention to in your contracts, folks, they're not going to pay you as much as if it would have been published, which sucks on our end because it's the same amount of time to create it, even if you're not going through the editorial process. But anyway, I had an editor kill a piece. It was nothing about what I did. It was poorly scoped. It didn't really align with their content calendar. I don't know that because I'm not an internal player with that particular team. And so she sent me an email, said, hey, we're going to kill this. Just as a reminder, this is the kill fee, what you can invoice. And I saw that and I was like, whoa, like that's a lot less than I thought it was. But instead of flying off the handle, getting on my keyboard and being like, actually, per our contract, blah, 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 this is what you owe me for this. I went and I looked at the contract. I found the language. I found, I had negotiated that in of what I wanted to be paid in this situation. And I just said, hey, I looked at the contract. It was my understanding that the kill fee is this. I'm sorry that this piece isn't going to getting published. Could you help me understand the difference? And she was just like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I forgot that was what you had to, you know what I'm saying? So
yes,
it
so much of that is
malicious.
like,
It was just, she has a lot of, things to keep in order in her mind, and it slipped her mind that I had negotiated a higher rate.
Yeah. And so much of that in finding answers in any sort of problems in your business or like your processes is approaching that with curiosity. Again, you didn't get on your computer as easy as it would have been to be like, hey, you owe me money.
Yeah.
It was, you approached it with curiosity where you went and got the information and then you said, hey, I read this. Did I miss something?
Yeah.
Like, can you explain? And then they're like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Approach it with curiosity. Y'all, curiosity is a superpower.
exactly. Then you get an apology and you get paid. I mean,
Oh,
win, 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 win,
love
win.
Start over. So developing boundaries as a business owner can feel really intimidating. We get it. We've been there, but you can't be successful without them. Hard lines and hell no's are what keep you from filling your calendar and your life with draining, uninspiring, low-paying work, because that's what you get when you say yes to everything and everyone. Remember, you're not for everybody. Boundaries give you the bandwidth to go after the work that's fun for you without sacrificing your profit and give you more space. So here's some shit you can't skip if you want to up your boundary game.
All right. So starting with number 1, like we talked about today, folks, make your own hell no manifesto. Think about your values and your preferences and make a list of the shit you won't do for money. These can be things you've been asked to do before that have given you the ick, or just lines that you know you won't cross. It could be as simple as a type of work you won't do, like we said before, because it's not your area of expertise, or a way of working that doesn't align with your conscience. Number 2, think about ways you can set yourself and your clients up for success in upholding your boundaries. This could be a simple how to work with me document that you provide in new working relationships, or you could even hire a lawyer to write your agreements. Number 3, give yourself the freedom to be flexible. Know that upholding your boundaries at work and life can be messy and that you will not always get it right, and that is okay. Give yourself permission to hold tight to your hard lines, but to also grow and evolve your boundaries as your life and your business requires you to. 4, this one might be my favorite. Praise other women for upholding boundaries in their business when you see it happening. So this could be, a quick Slack message or DM after a call to say like, hey girl, I saw you over there holding tight to your terms. I really like how you handled that client who was trying to pressure you into making some changes. You weren't having it, but you did it with such grace. Fist bump emoji. You guys get the idea.
Hey, creepy friends. Before we end the episode, we wanted to let you know we're planning an extra special episode starring you. We'd love to know what questions you have about your business. We'll answer as many as we can in an upcoming episode. And if you have a fun story to share about being yourself in your business, the boundaries you've created in your business, or just a Chad sliding into your DMs, we would love to hear it. You can email us at scopecreepshow@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 615-601-2072.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Scope Creep. We're your hosts, Liz Talego and Jamie Cox. We'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about how to avoid getting duped by bad business advice and the shady shit we've seen from girl bosses on the internet. If you love Scope Creep, leave us a 5-star review. If you didn't love us, then please leave. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Scope Creep Show. You can find Jamie at JMER Cox and Liz at LIZTALAGO. If you have a topic you'd love for us to discuss or a question you'd want answered, you can email us at scopecreepshow@gmail.com. Until next time, stay creepy.